Welcome to Ripon Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. Man, what a great night to be here. It's beautiful out. We get to be here and worship like we just did. Thanks, guys, for coming out. Give them a round of applause for making time to be out here tonight. It's just awesome to have the chance to worship with some people that are from elsewhere and just to come in and do that. That was really awesome. If you're new tonight or if you haven't been here for a while, what you need to know is that we are near the beginning of a new series, a series that we're going to be spending the whole summer on, and it's going to be directly in the book of Romans. Maybe as you walked in, you might have noticed that we have some Italian sodas for you. We're when in Rome this summer, so we're going to have some fun with that. So feel free after the service to go and grab yourself an Italian soda. Make sure you take advantage of them. They're pretty good. If you haven't had one, quite delicious. Make sure you add cream. Makes it a little extra delicious. So go ahead and do that. Tonight, we're actually already into chapter 2. So we've been going through the book of Romans and looking directly at what the book of Romans says and what Paul says, who wrote it. And so we're all the way into chapter 2. We're in the second step of it for ourselves tonight. And as we read it, I think it's awesome because Paul, he starts off with these three words. These three words, it's, you may think. Those three words are some pretty interesting words, aren't they? You may think. When you hear those words, there's a few things you typically have that come to mind, right? Like there's a possibility of what's going to happen. You may think that one thing is the case, but in actuality, it's not the case. You may think that going swimming before an hour after you eat, right? Less than an hour after you eat is not a good thing. Does anybody heard that one before? Like you're not supposed to do that? Well, my wife and I had this discussion, and I, of course, Googled it, and we came to the conclusion that we're just going to go with a light snack, okay? Because it's inconclusive, okay? So whatever you think about that, we're going to go with that. You may think, if you're a sports fanatic, that this is the year, right? This is the year that your team is going to make it. You're going to make it to the big dance, the Super Bowl, the championship game, whatever it is. Well, so does every other team's fans, okay? So only one of us are going to be right. So you may think, but you're probably wrong. So hold it loosely. You may think, has anybody ever heard the phrase that you only use 10% of your brain? Yes? You may think you only use 10% of your brain, but in reality, you use all of it. It's just only a little bit of it at a time. So you use your whole brain. It's not like you have just empty space up there, right? Like you use your whole brain. Maybe my wife's saying I don't use my whole brain. That's another topic for another day. But you use your whole brain. Have you ever heard those words, right? You may think. You may think. Whenever you hear those words, someone is about to tell you something. They're about to tell you that there is another way to think. There's another way of realizing it. There's another way of understanding something. And Paul has something in mind as he's saying these three words. But before we get to it, I have a question for you. This question is this. On a scale, all right, we'll use the salsa scale, all right? So on a scale of mild, medium, or chunky, how big of a sinner are you? All right? So compared to other people, like get in your mind, think about it for a little while. Mild, medium, or chunky, how big of a sinner are you? Don't shout it out. It'd be a little awkward. But just have that in your mind, all right? Have that little piece in your mind. How big of a sinner are you? Mild, medium, or chunky? And just hold on to that. Hold on to that as we talk, and we'll come back to that. Now, to really understand why Paul is using those three words of you may think, we actually have to rewind a little bit more as well. Because if you were here last week or if you've heard about chapter 1 or read chapter 1, the second half of chapter 1, Paul spends a great amount of time talking about all these people. These people that instead of worshiping God, worship created things. And as they worship created things, because they worship those things, they end up falling into all these practices, all these ways of doing things that really aren't so good. And so Paul is kind of detailing all these sins, all these terrible things that these people do. And as he lists them out, I can kind of just see us, right? We're listening to Paul talk, and there he is. He's just listening to all these things that these people do, and we're just going, yep, that's right. Look at those people. Those people are messing it up again. They're not getting it right. The people they're these people, right? And I think all of us have this idea of those people. You know, like those people. Do you know what I'm talking about? those people that we really don't even feel bad for judging because they just seem that bad. And so Paul, he's listing out these people, and we're nodding our heads going along like, yep, those people, they're the worst. They're the worst people. I can't believe that we even associate ourselves with those people over there. Those people, they're the worst. And then finally we get to what Paul says in Romans 2:1. With those three words, he says this: you may think you can condemn such people, but you are just as bad. And you have no excuse. When you say they are wicked and should be punished, you are condemning yourself. For you who judge others do these very same things. But Paul, what are you saying, right? Like, I just heard you talking about how terrible they are. I thought we were all on the same page here, right? Like, those people are terrible. Why are you talking about me now? Why are you talking about me? It almost seems cruel, like it was a setup, right? He was setting us up for a quick realization. I mean, here we were feeling so good about ourselves, and there Paul has to just go and ruin it for us, right? He just has to ruin it for us. Now, what's he doing? Why is he doing this? Why is he saying that? Why is he helping us realize that we're also in that same boat as those other people are? I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to take these blinders off. He's trying to open up our eyes to what's around us. We say pretty often that we would love for our lives and the world to be a more fair and a more just place. We wish it was better, don't we? And because of that, not only do we want the world to be that way, but we kind of want God to be that way. We want God to be fair, and we want God to be just. And I think we do. We should. We want God to be a just God. I mean, there are some things in this world that are just terrible, right? There are some things that deserve punishment, that deserve justice, like people not using their turn signals, for goodness sakes. There are things. I mean, I was down here over on a four-way stop the other day, and there I was pulling up, and a person across from me, they stopped first, and then I pull up just a hair after them, and they don't have a turn signal on, right? So I'm like, okay, we're just going to both go opposite directions, like two ships passing the night, no worries, it's all going to be fine. So I'm like, I start accelerating, and as I look across at this person that's driving the other way, I see this look. You know the look, right? The look of, you did something wrong. You should feel really guilty about yourself or bad about yourself. You did something wrong. And I'm thinking, what did I do? What's going on? Why is this guy not going? And as I get past him and I look in my rearview mirror, I see he turns left. And I'm thinking, I don't feel guilty. You didn't use your turn signal. It's your fault. It's your fault. Now, obviously there are far worse things than not using your turn signal, but it kind of makes the point for us, doesn't it? Kind of makes the point. If we want justice and we want to believe God to be just, then we have to face a reality. And that reality is we can't just look at other people, we actually have to look in the mirror too. It's funny, ever since I've thought about that incident, I have had multiple occasions, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have not used my turn signal since that moment, and I was so mad at that person, I'm like, wait, I just didn't use my turn signal. I think it's crazy because there's this point where we have to, when we look at other people and we want the world to be a just place and we want God to be just, where we have to look in the mirror. It has to apply to us too. I mean, how did you rate yourself? Are you medium, chunky, or mild salsa, right? Or sinner? Which one of the three are you? Where are you on that list? Because there's a standard, and we need standards. I mean, you think of a report card. You got to have grades, otherwise you have no idea how you're doing. Grades matter. They help us if we're moving forward or not. I mean, it might make people feel good for a little while without grades, but then ultimately we want to know how you're doing. How are you doing? There are grades for a reason, and as soon as you realize that you want justice, then you have to start thinking about what the standard is. What's the standard? If we want justice, then what's that going to look like? For Paul, as he's writing this, he's aware that there already is a standard. And he is entrenched in this standard. He knows it in and out. He understands it probably better than most people that have ever lived. He's on the top tier of people who have understood this standard. He talks about it in Romans 2:12. He says, when the Gentiles sin, they will be destroyed, even though they never had God's written law. And the Jews who do have God's law will be judged by that law when they fail to obey it. Now he's talking about something there. He's talking about this standard, this law as he refers to it. This set of rules, basically. And this set of rules had been around for a number of years, thousands of years. And it was called the law or the Torah. It's this scripture that all the Jewish people had referred to. So if you were to study it out and look at what it is, you might think, for starters, that's like the Ten Commandments, right? Like it's the Ten Commandments that make up this law, and you'd be almost right, but there's actually more to it. It's not just the Ten Commandments. It's actually the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's all 5 of those books make up this Torah, this book of the law. And as these Jewish people were following the law, that's what made them Jewish. I mean, they might have heritage, but if you were a really devout Jew, then that meant that you followed the law to a T as best as you possibly could. And Paul was included in that. And it formed their identity. It made their nation this unique, set-apart nation. It was who they were. And like I said, Paul was so entrenched in this law. He knew it so well. He was actually a part of this group that would have been one of the most devout and most strict and zealous groups of followers of this law. And we can assume, because he actually says so in other places, that he'd spent much of his younger life showing people all the ways that they'd fallen short of this law. He was an expert. Now back to those 3 words, right? Paul is saying, you may think. You may think you want justice. I mean, Paul knows all about that. There's this one point in Paul's life where he's headed from Jerusalem to Damascus, and he has papers in his hands that literally have the ability for him to go find some Christians who he thinks aren't obeying the law, put them in chains, and bring them back. It's on that walk that he ends up getting to know Jesus pretty well, and his whole life changes. But he was all about justice. He knows what it's like. And we're all about it too, aren't we? Like, we want it. There are some things that just feel like it deserves it. I mean, murder and abuse and people stealing others' life savings when it's really just in just crazy ways. Or people not using blinkers, right? But when we do, when we want that justice, when we think justice through, what we ultimately find is that we deserve it too. Like, we should have it too. In Romans 2:3 and then 5-6, it says, since you judge others for doing these things, why do you think you can avoid God's judgment when you do the same things? And then he says, but because you are stubborn and refuse to turn from your sin, you are storing up terrible punishment for yourself. For a day of anger is coming, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed. He will judge everyone according to what they have done. Now, you read those verses, and it sounds a little ominous. But let's just take a moment and appreciate this for its fullest scope. This is God, and people are getting his justice. And when God gives us justice, it's to an extreme degree, right? Like, God's justice is full and complete and comprehensive. And so that's a scary set of verses. That's ominous. And so to give us a feel for that, I thought we'd just take a moment and appreciate what it potentially could look like. I don't know, with a clip from a more justice-oriented, maybe not justice, but doomsday-oriented clip. Take a look.
3 billion human lives ended on August 29th, 1997. The survivors of the nuclear fire called the war Judgment Day. They lived only to face a new nightmare, the war against the machines.
Now, maybe that got you to appreciate that a little bit more. It's pretty ominous and frightening. I know it's funny because, it's machines, it's not God, and it catches us by surprise, but it is frightening. It is real. There are evil things in this world that demand justice, and it's sobering then to realize that if we want that justice, we're included in the people that deserve it. You may think you can condemn those people, but we do the same things that those people do so often. Now, as we sit here, and maybe we're feeling a bit, discouraged, or it feels a little dark and ominous just to think about these things and these realities, it's important to keep on reading what Paul says, because he's doing something here. He's helping us understand something. He reminds us of something. There's actually an opposite side to justice. And for Paul, that would be called a promise. There's a promise that God has always had for his people. And he begins to talk about it in Romans 2, 6-7. He says, he will judge everyone according to what they have done. He will give eternal life to those who keep on doing good, seeking after the glory and honor and immortality that God offers. As much as God will punish those who do wrong because he's just, Paul says God will reward those who do good and seek the things of God. There's a reward out there. There's something good that God promises for those who can do that. And don't we all want that? That's what we're talking about here. We want that. We want that for ourselves. And if you ask most people, they're probably going to start to list off a few different things that you probably should start doing, right? You're going to probably start talking about the different things you should do, like help enough people. If you want to spend eternity in heaven with God, then you should probably help people. That'd probably be a good thing to do. Or you should probably be kind enough, or maybe don't swear enough, or make sure you use your blinker. There's some things that you have to do, according to some people. But that general consensus, if you just ask someone on the street, basically amounts to do enough good stuff to outweigh the bad so we can earn the good side of justice. In other words, eternity with God in heaven. If you just do enough good stuff, you'll be fine. Now, there's a little bit of truth to this. Except it comes with a fatal flaw. Paul knows this, and we're going to get really deep into that next week in chapter 3, but he starts to hint at it here. And Paul, when he was writing this, had this really deep in him, because for them, in that day, being a Jewish person, it wasn't just this list of things of being good to other people. It was even more than that. It was to be a good Jew. It was to do the sacrifices and celebrate the holy days and do the rituals. And most of all, it was about knowing the law, knowing the Torah in and out so that you could be wise in that way. And he warns people about this because he says this in how flawed it is. He says this in Romans 2:20. He says, you think you can instruct the ignorant and teach children the ways of God, for you are certain that God's law gives you complete knowledge and truth. Well then, if you teach others, why don't you teach yourself? You tell others not to steal, but do you steal? Now, I know this is harsh, but it's harsh because this is the deep teaching trap we still fall into today. We still fall into this trap that if we just know more, if we just know a little bit more, then we'll be good enough. We'll be a little bit better than those other people. It'll make us good enough. And knowledge is great. But never knowledge that leads you to the place of you may think you can condemn such people. If you're looking for deeper teaching, deeper Bible knowledge, that's awesome. That's great. You should. You should want to know more, but watch out. Watch out, because it should never be for the sake of superiority. There are no super Christians. You can't be a super Christian. if you want deep, for Paul, it's knowledge that leads to a different way of living, to actions that are different, and then in addition to that, a way of being humble. If we skip ahead to chapter 12, he says this in verse 3 of chapter 12, "Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us." So let me ask you, what kind of salsa are you? Mild, medium, chunky? What kind of a sinner are you? Mild, medium, chunky? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you are. The point is that we all do it. The point is that we all are disqualified. We all fall short. So how? How do we find this eternity? How do we move forward? How do we have this different kind of life with God that we're changed about? How does it happen? What is it? It's not a checklist. It's not some checklist we can go off like, I was good enough to those people and those people. Maybe not so much that, but I did this other really good thing, so that kind of covers that other one up. It's not that. And if it's not this deeper knowledge, if it's not just knowing these really deep theological concepts or really knowing the different verses in the Bible and being able to quote them at random, if it's not that, then what is it? Now in chapter 2, Paul doesn't spell it out verbatim. He's not quite there yet. He's building this argument and he's getting there. He's laying this groundwork for what he's going to ultimately say. But he does plant seeds for what's to come. There's something that he's getting to and he's building this argument. He's almost there. And he's planting seeds for what's to come. Check out what he says in 28 through 29. "For you are not a true Jew just because you were born of Jewish parents or because you have gone through the ceremony of circumcision. No, a true Jew is one whose heart is right with God. And true circumcision is not merely obeying the letter of the law. Rather, it is a change of heart produced by the Spirit. And a person with a changed heart seeks praise from God, not from people." It's a changed heart. It's an alteration of you at your core. Something different there. That's what's required. How do you get that? How does that happen? Paul begins to spell it out in the coming chapters, and we'll get to that. But as we are right here in chapter 2, there are a couple things that I think are really important for us to understand and know, and we can leave with tonight, because we're getting to the end here, and there's the last couple things. The first thing is this. I don't know if you know this, but if you ask anybody who doesn't come to church, who is not a Christian, kind of what the reason is for why they don't show up to church or aren't a Christian. If you ask the people that question, the most predominant answer you'll get is that people that go to church or people that are Christians are hypocrites. It's super, super, super common. It's just what people answer with. And I know we can argue about whether that's a good statement or not, but it's there. And it's been there for forever. Even Paul was dealing with that. He says this in Romans 2:24. He says, "No wonder the scriptures say, the Gentiles blaspheme the name of God because of you." That's pretty serious. They knew the law. They judged others by it, but they didn't do it. Now for us, tonight, it's not because we mess up. People don't call us hypocrites because we mess up. The one way that it sometimes might happen is because we judge and condemn people instead of working on our relationship with God ourselves. We're looking down our noses. And I don't think necessarily you guys do that a whole ton, but it's definitely something that I can see as a possibility. And I think if you think about it, there's probably been some times where we've done it. I've done it. And so in front of you, I have this card. It's got two sides, and on one side, you can grab it. There should be one in the seats in front of you. But on one side, it says, "You may think." You may think. Put it somewhere that you'll remember. Put it somewhere that you'll see it often. And it's a reminder that as we follow Jesus, God is beginning to change our hearts. Our hearts. And as he changes our hearts, it's not our place to look down our noses at other people and begin condemning them. You may think you can. That's not our place. Now, the second part is this. Instead. Now, the last thing that he said there in verse 28 and 29, it was about a changed heart, right? That there's a changed heart that happens when we begin to follow Jesus. And really, fundamentally, when you break it all down, that's what a relationship with God is. And that's how we spend eternity with God, by following Jesus. And Paul gets to this. But to have a changed heart is what we want. So I have a simple prayer on the other side of that card. It says, "Dear God, change my heart." Now, I know that seems really simple and really maybe a little bit cheesy, but put this somewhere that you can see it. And I say that because in 100 different situations in my life, that's what I've had to pray. And when I've prayed it, it has been one of the most profound prayers of my life. Because I'll be going into a situation and I'll think I can look down at somebody for whatever they're doing. And as I'm going through that situation, as I've said that prayer, "God, change my heart," I don't want to be about condemning people. When I've prayed that, it hasn't been me, but there's been some crazy thing that happens inside of me. A lot of the anger lifts. A lot of the frustration goes away. And I begin to see it so much clearer. It's so simple. But those few words, those 5 words, can be a really helpful way in following Jesus and helping us see people in these different ways. Dear God, change my heart. Now, as we approach the summer, we're in the summer now, if you couldn't tell outside. One of the things that we do every summer is celebrate people that have had that changed heart. This group of people that begin to follow Jesus. And one of the ways that we do that every summer is by having a big fun picnic out at Green Lake Conference Center and doing baptisms. So we're going to be doing that again this summer. I don't know if you want to toss it up there, if there's a date for it on the screen. Do you have that up there for me? There we go. It's on August 26th. It's going to be an awesome weekend, awesome time at the Green Lake Conference Center. But if you're interested in being part of that, if you're here tonight and you think, like, I have had my life changed. Whenever somebody does that, whenever they begin to follow Jesus, as we look in the Bible, what it shows us is that that person then goes and gets baptized. It doesn't save them. All it does is this public way of showing other people that change of heart has happened inside of them. And they want to show that to other people. So it's this really fun celebration. It's an awesome way to take another step in your faith, the next step. And I encourage you, if you're interested in that, you can do so. There's actually going to be a short class after all the services this weekend. It'll be next door in the lighthouse. I think there'll be a picture of the lighthouse there. So it's next door, right over here. Pastor Jack will be over there. If you are interested and you just want to ask some questions, hop over there and he'll answer any questions that you might have. But with that, I want to close with a prayer. And that prayer is going to be very simple. I just want to ask God that we would be able to not condemn, but instead ask for a changed heart. And that would be the way that we could live this week. So if you would bow your heads and pray with me, that would be awesome. Dear God, thank you so much that you love us. Thank you that you take care of us. Thank you that even though we can't live up to the standard that is there, we are able to spend eternity with you. We are able to live a different life now because of you. So God, as we sit here tonight, we ask that you would help us have a changed heart, that we would not think we can condemn other people, but that instead we would want to follow you, that we would want to have our hearts changed by you, and that would be something that would guide us. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.